It's the GameDev Breakdown Podcast. My name's Todd Mitchell, and there, rejoining us at last, is John Schreiber. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. I've caffeinated later in the evening than normal so that I can be extra hyperactive, and I am feeling
it. You're floating in the air just a little bit. You got that sweet-ass mason jar to drink out of.
We love them. I forgot what it was, why we ended up with a bunch of them, but we have a bunch, and I'm like, man, you know what? You don't have to go get water very often when you have one of those.
I grew up with those. We used to use those a lot around the house. How are things? Are you playing any games? Are you still a gamer? What's your life like?
I have been just playing pretty much just the familiar and the standard. We don't play PUBG anymore, and Overwatch is what I've been playing, and I recently cracked back into the survival horror game The Forest because it was officially released. Okay. And I had had it for a while, and I gotta say that it's probably the best rock puncher. It does it for me. Ark doesn't do it nearly as much for me as The Forest. Other than that, man, I just checked out E3 and was that a roller coaster for me. And there's some cool titles coming out that I'm really anxious to try on PC. That Cyberpunk, I know we're a long way out on that, but man, that's really got my interest peaked.
Yeah, that looks good. I started playing Fortnite a little bit. I went back. I know. I went back to check it out, and it kind of grabbed me a little bit once they added some persistent stats and stuff like that. Now it's kind of fun. I'm not going to buy the. They're going to change seasons in 3 days, so I'm not going to buy any season pass or anything. But I might next time. $10. Who cares?
I dropped it once and had fun, man. Unlocked a few things. It's fun, And I played it enough. I felt like to give those guys $10. There comes a point like that, that's why I'm a big fan of the free-to-play model. We've talked about this before on the show, but there comes a point to where if you play a free game and it's good long enough, most reasonable people will buy something from the store.
I think I'm good at it, so I like it. I might stream it once I feel like it won't be embarrassing anymore, but actually I'm getting pretty consistent top 10s, top 25s. So
that's awesome.
Somebody talked me into trying Warframe. I haven't yet, but I'm going to start playing some Warframe. I think picking up some good free-to-play things that are actually popular would be a lot of fun.
Dude, Warframe's not too bad. Did you do Brawlhalla yet?
Only with you.
We did try to play that once and talk. That's right. God, that was a train wreck.
we put in a session just to have fun with it, which was cool, and then we were like, yeah, maybe we can do this and record a podcast. And ultimately, I think it was on your side. You decided that you absolutely could not.
No, there was no way. Not if I wanted to beat those guys. Excellent free-to-play game, too. But Warframe is not bad. I played it for a little bit. I think the thing that really got me, but, of course, don't let this tarnish your experience that you're getting ready to have, because it is fun. I do like it. Is that its unpolishedness started to wear me down a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
At first you're kind of like, yeah, and then after a while you're like, yeah. So unless have they done major updates to it recently?
Actually, the guy on Twitter, somebody on Twitter talked me into this, and a couple of guys were talking about playing. And they're both with fairly prominent studios, so I thought, yeah, that might be fun. Get in with some industry people and play some games and pick their brains a little bit. But it sounded like there was a recent update more recently than the last time I downloaded it, so it's probably worth taking a look.
Cool. Good to know.
I don't know how much you have been following any sort of industry news lately, but have you heard about this Guild Wars 2 ArenaNet thing, where they fired 2 of their writers?
I only heard. I didn't read into it. So I saw a headline, probably from some of the pages I like.
I want to talk about that tonight because I know this sort of breaks our own rule about not doing too much about news, but this does sort of lead pretty well into sort of communication strategy with your players. Thank you for putting your headphones on.
I'm getting locked into this one. My interest is peaked.
Yeah. I'm going to run you through sort of what happened, and we're going to talk hypothetically about some things and get a little philosophical for the evening.
Deal.
Okay. So what happened here? This is weird. And first, I want to preface this by saying karma really beat my ass tonight because I started to record this show without you. when you sort of dropped off the radar for half an hour. And I was like, well,
yeah, that was totally my bad.
I thought, like, he's probably asleep again or whatever, left the house or something. So I started to record. My son immediately woke up and got upset in bed, so I had to go talk to him.
Oh.
Then I went from there to the bathroom and came back. I left the recording going. I'm like, I'll just edit this out, and walked back onto camera while I was still zipping up and fastening my belt. So there's some pretty awesome footage on my hard drive if you want me to release that far and wide. Anyway,
No, I don't think so.
Anyway, so this whole thing started, for me it started early last week because I tweeted about this. I got a notice in my email that said, hey, your Guild Wars 2 account got hacked. And I said, what Guild Wars 2 account? Because I've never played the game in my life. I didn't own it. When it came out, I don't believe it was free to play. Since that time, it's gone free to play. I took a look at that. I logged into what turned out to be my Guild Wars 1 account, which I did have. My buddy Dwayne at an old job, he was like, this game is so cool, and he got me a copy of it so we could play together. It was a super nice thing, and I liked the game. Oddly enough, a couple days later, Guild Wars 2 blows up in the news, probably more than it did when it came out, because I don't think it was ever that popular. The situation was ArenaNet, who develops Guild Wars 2, let 2 of their writers go because of negative interactions with community members, particularly one Twitch streamer that like had their blessing, or he was like a YouTuber or something, but he was somebody who was in the good graces of the studio. And this female writer, who I'm going to try not to name, stop me if I name her, she lights this guy up on Twitter just for communicating. And I'm going to come at this from a different perspective than you're probably, as you can imagine, going to see on Twitter.
Okay.
Woke Twitter is all over this one because it's like, this guy was mansplaining. Let me start at the beginning. So at some point, this writer was involved in an AMA, presumably on Reddit, where they, for hours, talked to the community about developing the game, and I don't know what all they covered, but after that, I guess some stuff was still fresh in this woman's mind, and she goes, I'm going to put up a big Twitter thread about writing for MMO characters. So she does this, I think it was like 3rd of July, early this month. So she puts up a bunch of tweets about, here's my approach, here's what we do, here are the challenges of this part, and one tweet was sort of open-ended. It sounded like, I think she said something like, I'm not sure that you can X considering Y. That kind of thing. And this guy, this streamer or YouTuber, whatever he is, picks this tweet because he spends a big chunk of his life playing this game. And he goes, he said something like, I really appreciate what you put out here. However, on this point, I think the following. And she lights him up. She lit him up. She responded like, well, don't tell me what goes on at my own company. And then she like quotes him again so she can say something to the effect of like, this is what it's like for women in game development. And so, of course, everybody attacks this guy who's, buddies with her. She's got like 14,000 Twitter followers, and everybody attacks this guy. Well, ArenaNet catches wind of this and goes, nah, we're not going to have this. The way it sounded like there was not much discussion. There was not much like play nice or, apologize to this guy. There was, you are fired.
Wow. So
people were surprised by that bold action. I kind of am too. However, where I diverge from Twitter is I spent maybe an hour looking over some of the previous stuff she's said on Twitter, trying to figure out what kind of person she probably was to work with. I am not surprised they fired her ultimately. It was a situation where she seems like a pretty super abrasive person, and a whole lot of her previous activity is like gamers are the worst and men are the worst and all this stuff. Polygon later on interviewed her, and I think that just came out like today or yesterday, and she said something about how she only worked for ArenaNet because she left another company in what sounded like unpleasant circumstances, whoever's fault, and she was thinking about getting out of the industry completely, and ArenaNet was like, hold on, we got a space for you, and we think that you would be a good fit here. She says that they knew what she was like, that she speaks up on Twitter, that she's active in social media, all this stuff, and that they were encouraging of that on the way in, and then later they're like, you screwed it all up. And
Mm.
and one writer who is a male spoke up to this same guy and was like, "Hey, bro, she didn't ask for your advice or whatever," and he got let go too. So they are outski.
Wow. They wanted a reason to get rid of that.
It's weird because yeah, there are a lot of people who are saying super unpleasant things like, "Yeah, you got what you deserved," and enjoy unemployment and all this stuff, and that sucks. However, I still agree with the firing. Like, as a mature person, I still think like she seems like she was probably sort of asking for it with some of the like. This was not her first taste of disrespecting people who are fans. So something I tweeted about when I first heard about this is you can find people on Twitter all the time talking about, quote, gatekeepers, who are people who are like, "Oh, you want to get into Dark Souls? You can't get into Dark Souls. Let me tell you why. I know about Dark Souls. This is my thing, and it's a hard game, and let me explain to you what you need to know," and all this stuff. Well, if we call that a gatekeeper, but all you want to do is share some story ideas with someone who writes, like, you can't be a creative gatekeeper either. Like, that goes both ways.
Yeah.
So if you're a professional in charge of playing nice with the community and you can't, she shared some pretty wild stuff on Twitter. Like, as far as some people will find this extreme, some people won't. Like, she shared a bunch of fundraising stuff for Antifa. Like, there's some surprising stuff on her Twitter, and like, she is a known developer for this company. Like, I would not be surprised to hear ArenaNet say, "We actually had quite a few issues with her." You know, at some point, like, yes, you encourage the outspokenness, but at some point you have to go like, we ain't down with what you stand for. So that's what happened, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on a firing like that, and I want to talk about, for the rest of us who are involved in creative pursuits, like, how do you really approach setting boundaries for communicating with people on the outside of what you do who are looking in?
There's a lot of layers. It's an onion. There's a whole lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here.
There's a whole lot going on. The very first thing is gut instinct, right off the top. You're talking evolutionary reaction here to this story, because I pulled it up too. I was looking at some of the Google Variety actually wrote about it, and I was looking at some of it, and then I went and looked at her Twitter when you mentioned it. A couple of things are jumping out. I guess I should just say it, trying to think of a way to word this, but it's not so much the ideals of that person is what struck me. It was more so just the behavior. Yeah. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? And I think that mode of behavior, whatever mask it needs to wear, is just unacceptable.
Yeah, and I know in my storytelling I sound like a gamer bro who's, you know, got my pitchfork. I don't intend to be that way. I intend to take a sort of open-minded approach to this, but her communication was, just before this even started, it just seemed so spiteful, particularly towards men and toward gamers, that I think, that's not to say she shouldn't be working in games, but it does indicate she seemed super unhappy, and it seemed like, I want to make clear, she may feel that way for great reasons. Like, if some of the stuff she says has actually been happening, then yes, she's right to be frustrated, angry. At the end of the day, there are a lot of people like this guy who she had a conversation with who are not actually trying to break her down. It was clear to me he had nothing but good intentions and wanted to be heard. And this was a form of the company reaching out. She argues on Twitter or in interviews, I saw this with her name attached to it, saying that was a private Twitter thread. And no, it literally wasn't. It was not. There was nothing private about it. It didn't mean she was inviting people to discuss it, but by posting to Twitter publicly, you sort of are.
I mean, this is something people need to realize, and I think that this is where creative people tend to fail in trying to get a professional-minded thing, is that the brand you represent, even if it's your own, you have to be held to some level of accountability.
Yeah.
And that's what you saw taking place. There was a brand here. There's a certain mentality you want your corporation, your company, to be associated with, and, you know, abrasive, negative, reactionary, reckless attitudes are just not accepted. It's not brand building. It tarnishes it. And then so when you have someone like that within your ranks, and then you have these public platforms, yeah, what you say matters. Even as an individual, it sounds maybe harsh, like you have more responsibility, but you knew the job was dangerous when you took it.
Right.
So I would expect that. If I worked for a company, I would expect that same thing. But what my behavior is on my personal page reflects the culture and yeah, the type of people that work for that company. So what can you say? I'm looking at this guy's YouTube, by the way,
Yeah.
while we're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
because this is something I wanted to mention to add to you saying that it seems like she wants to pick a fight, which it does, because if you click on his page, here's end of 2017 Guild Wars 2 account tour, comprehensive review of Guild Wars 2, review of this thing, Guild Wars, review of this part of Guild Wars, this one, this one. So he's got 5 videos here right off the bat. When I click his page, this guy plays the game from the company that here's another Guild Wars. Why would you not click on this, see who this person was, before you just immediately start flaming them? Because this is a fan. Here's another one, it's a fan, this wasn't worded harshly at all. It's a fan trying to have an open discussion.
As far as I could see, start to finish, all of his tweets really seemed very sincere to me. And I mean, I work on the internet. This is part of my job to, understand tones. And I can't help but laugh at that mason jar. I'm sorry.
Hey, y'all. Here.
But meanwhile, like every argument she made, start to finish, there was something wrong with. Like, this was not meant to be a discussion. Okay, well, if I look at the other tweets that came back to you, the ones who praised you, you came right back to those people and said, oh, thank you, or elaborated on your thoughts. Like, this person wanted to take part in that conversation that was going on, and you didn't allow him to do it, and you attacked him for it. That's not okay. And my other thing was, in really determining, like, yes, I'm sorry, she's at fault for this, and she is probably deserving of at least punishment, if not termination. The entire time, interviews, quotes, tweets, everything, she never once, that I can recall, it didn't look like she ever once took any responsibility whatsoever. In fact, she attacks the president of ArenaNet for, he did this. He took me into this room and he forced me, a woman, to stand there and take this from him, and kept making it about gender and kept making it about her special interest causes and everything. And it's like, at some point, don't you go, yeah, I blew it.
Yeah.
Like, really, at no point on your way out, long after, now after you've given up your key card, you've taken the cardboard box out to the trunk and driven home, you still don't want to go like, I could have done that differently. Like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, even if you were in the right, you would still have to think you could have done that differently.
It's a tough situation, I grant you, but Twitter seems largely, oh, she was being harassed. Like, not this time. She said in one of the interviews, like, I take this all the time internally at the company. Now, that part indicates that probably there was trouble in the office.
Yes.
But she goes, like, I have my job explained to me all the time, and I just decided not here, not today, not on my feed. Like, okay, well, you're admitting you put on your battle armor and picked up your sword. I do want to use this as a transition piece, but like, it is, like you said, there are a lot of layers, and it's hard not to keep looking at this and like, I'm sorry, I just keep coming up with reasons. Like, this firing was probably not the worst one I've heard of.
No, far from it. It makes sense. Yeah, I'm just looking through it more, looking at his YouTube videos. Seems like a normal cat. I don't see anything crazy going on. He's wearing a Guild Wars shirt in this video, for crying out loud.
It's not hard to find people saying shitty stuff to her, so I would think she would know the difference.
Yeah, really.
I understand the stuff that she's standing for and the cause that she's trying to further. I objectively understand what that is, but like, we're adults who don't really play the BS, let's harass people we don't like and let's talk shit on the internet. Like, we don't really engage in that very much. We're grown-ups. I have a wife who is a medical professional who has worked very hard her entire life. I know the difference between a female badass and a female complainer. And that's, you're getting the latter here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you want to be a badass, it's not the same thing as acting like a badass and just talking about how great you are and how no one has any place speaking to you ever. That doesn't really earn anything.
Yeah. It's just a certain personality trait that I've been noticing a lot lately too, is that criticism triggers that kind of reaction. Not criticism. It wasn't even criticism. It was the wrong thing I wanted to say, but that disagreement, that friendly disagreement.
Yeah.
That's a really key thing that I wish we could see brought back to the current climate, is that you can have a friendly disagreement with somebody. It can be okay. It doesn't have to be about violating a right for the disagreement to exist.
Yeah. I think it's hard to interpret criticism correctly when at the forefront of your thoughts all the time is, this is because I'm a woman, this is because I'm this is because I'm that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are doing it because of that reason, sometimes they're not. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt until you're pretty damn sure it's not well-founded.
Okay, yeah, oh man, I was about to pull from a personal example because my YouTube video has so many views for some reason. That one video I had that went viral. Some of the very rare moments of criticism, that would be a good way to say, this is completely invalid. It was never any information about anything that I did in the video. They were like, nobody cares about this boring old band. Like, that was a comment on there, something close to that, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was just like, what the heck? Like, that is the kind of criticism, what I'm saying? Like, what is barely, who cares? So that's what I mean. Like, you have that kind of criticism you can just chop off. But when there's some meaningful direction in the content, that's the kind of stuff you have to start to learn to pinpoint. Right. And so, you can take the example of, that old crappy band, and that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It can be brushed off a little bit easier than, having your sexuality or your sexual identity attacked or something like that. Yeah, that could be a little worse, or, however she was trying to view that. I say it wrong because I don't think like that. Right, I don't mean it out of disrespect. It's out of ignorance. You know what I mean? I don't deal with women's rights issues. I'm not up on it at all. So whatever you call that was happening, I think she would have to learn that kind of criticism, just chop it off, move forward, kind of like the old band comment.
Yeah.
I know the one hurts your feelings a little bit more, but still, that's the kind of criticism you should be able to identify as an adult and immediately shave off. When you are reactionary, you act like a child. It's just, that's the blunt way to say it.
I mean, to some extent, you might say I've had the reverse of this. And, when I was doing freelance writing for a website that was run by, I think, an all-female staff, all from Southern California, all very like-minded, all politically synced up, like it was very, very clear. And I think over a very short period of time, it became clear to everyone, what I was about, which was not so much that, like, I'm super conservative or something like that. It's just that I'm maybe not on your side of some issues. I will admit, like, it's real easy to get into that thing where, like, an editor nails you to the wall on something trivial and you go, like, this is because of who I am. This is because of like my viewpoints. Is because you just don't like me. Yeah. However, I'm a grown-ass professional, and so if there was some kernel of truth to that, I was able to just go along and do my business. Yeah. Now, you can make the argument, you're a straight white male or whatever, and so it doesn't happen as much to you. I'm sure that's true. True.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure that it sets the bar any lower or higher for you to perform well in your career. It's like you still need to compete with me. And so you need to go ahead and let stuff not bother you, and you need to get some shit done.
Yeah.
Just like if I started throwing a fit with the writing staff at the site that I was writing for, like, they would have just given my stuff to someone else to do. I couldn't even complain about that. But yeah, so the whole thing is very strange, and like Twitter is Twitter, and game journalism sites are game journalism sites. So you're largely hearing the same narrative, and it doesn't sound anything like this. Of course, it sounds like, why are you Satanist gamer bros harassing this female writer? This isn't fair. And No one's reaching out to the guy. No one's reaching out to the dude who talked to her. But no, everyone wants an interview from her, and everyone wants an interview from ArenaNet, and they want to tear apart those quotes and everything. And I'm sorry, I think there's a better lesson we can take from this. Regardless of who you are, what you think, what's going on, you have to use sound judgment in the way that you communicate with people.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that went wrong here.
Yeah.
I would overlook everything else. I'm not saying because this person supported things that I think are egregious on Twitter, that doesn't mean she shouldn't work for the company. Doesn't mean she shouldn't make a game that I played for a week and went like, okay, cool, this game is neat. But if you can't speak to somebody with a little bit of respect, just common decency,
yeah,
well, that's a bad sign. That shows bad judgment. And bad judgment is usually not like a part-time thing.
That is an excellent point.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question because I feel like this could turn into a little bit of an interesting side discussion.
Finally.
What about if she had this spat and it wasn't about the game? How would that change the dynamic? Do you think it would continue as normal?
Help me pin down the details.
Say the same thing happens, except it's a criticism about not something related to an ArenaNet game. And she is kind of having her own talk, but it still became something viral.
So let's say she's talking about something political, perhaps.
Exactly. Just something totally different. Totally
and a player of the game, is that part of your hypothetical? A player of the game responds and goes, hey, I think you're wrong about this and this is ridiculous.
Like I don't know. Kind of I wonder if that would change the dynamic even more. I was just wondering if she just had her own independent conversation with nothing from the game, let's say, nothing of that, but it still became viral.
Absolutely not. I don't think she should be fired or punished at all for that. And the proof is that she was already doing that. It seemed like she was in pretty aggressive disagreements on Twitter on the reg.
That's true.
It didn't, and it's possible that it was with players. I don't necessarily think that at all. I think what we all do on our off time, this was one of her points. What I do on my off time is what I do on my off time. I shoot that down in this case because it was about the game.
Okay, that does make sense. And then if it was a player, though, and it was then a random topic, because you brought that up twice, what would your view on that? It would be probably very circumstantial. That's my guess.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm willing to say, like, that's a tough one. Ultimately, I think I'd still side with her on that. I think if she had an argument with if I had an argument with a raider of the site that I write for, but it was about my dog or something, I wouldn't expect to be punished for that. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, okay.
So if you wanted to make a case that this should be treated like any discussion under the sun, whether it was about the game or not, we could have a conversation about that. Ultimately, I think I'd still come down like, you did this as an extension of an AMA about the game, which I'm sure was dictated by ArenaNet.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they didn't come up with this on their own. Maybe they did. But this was, I would call this pseudo-official, and you have to be pseudo-respectful, and she didn't manage to do that.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's very clear and makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, there's just no clocking out when you represent a brand like that.
To some extent these days, I think you're right. I think that's maybe one of the key takeaways. Like, you should expect, right or wrong, you should expect things to potentially come back.
You know, this is a subject that's completely disconnected, but it's from the business standpoint. When you're building a brand, when you're building your game, when you're building your game studio and you're making a brand, that's a big deal. Rock's got his own shoe. Michael Jordan's got his own shoe. You see what I'm going with this. You got to have your brand. And then you what we're talking about is who you fill up to represent your brand. And during the YouTube adpocalypse, where all of these content creators got left hanging out dry, that's because companies were able to be like, listen, we don't want to put our stuff on the Yo Mother Liquor YouTube 420 extravaganza. I don't want Coca-Cola on that. And people were like, oh, they're tearing our money away from us. They're ruining our lives. And it's like, no, you guys don't understand. Nothing you do is brand friendly, and it never has been. It seems like a kind of a cold, harsh, soulless corporate reality. But people really need to, if you want to make a good game studio or do anything, honestly, in America successfully, you've got to really internalize that brand, and then making sure you maintain brand-friendly behavior is what's really going to be huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent takeaway, and I kind of want to branch out and leave the writer alone. She's got her own shit to deal with now. Really, my ultimate conclusion here is that I hope maybe she does take a break from this for her own benefit. It seems like she was burnt out, super resentful, super spiteful, like, do whatever it is that makes you happy from here. And I would say this about anybody. I hope the same for the guy. If his involvement in this was sort of indicative of him being, resentful of the industry as well, do what you need to do.
I'm just going to be an asshole and say it. I think the further left-leaning LGBT mentality, they just need to realize that the fans of gaming aren't there yet. And that if you just continue this route, it's going to poison a lot of people to that message, because the very first memory they're going to have is this kind of a situation. And then when your group is brought up, it's like that is going to come to mind. And so the gaming community, the truth for those minority groups is that the gaming community just isn't there yet. It might get there, but walk on the rice paper for a little while. Just slow baby steps here. This is a huge deal when you're talking about, I don't know what they're talking about in the specific Guild Wars thing, but I just see this theme cropping up in gaming more than once with a different culture coming in. And it's like, you got to remember the reason this is what it is because this was the culture that's been there for a little bit. I'm not saying that this can't be a part of that ever or won't ever be a part of it. I don't know what to think about it because I don't spend any time over there. That's why I don't really have any thoughts about it. I'm not that kind of a person. I don't think
we all
like
come from wherever we come from. We can't help that.
Exactly. And so I just don't know about it at all. And then all of a sudden it shows up and it's like, hey, we want to change everything about all of the stuff that you've ever liked. And you're like, hey, no, who? I would do that to any. You see that going on a little bit with the Star Wars too, and there's some pushback with that. And it's like, hold on a minute, like this has been the demographic for a long time. Let this be okay. Let that be the young male mentality, and that's who you're going to still have to cater to a certain degree. The demographic is changing for gaming, I think, more rapidly than action movies. But you get what I'm saying.
I do, and we're taking this direction I didn't expect to go, but I think it's worth talking about. And I feel like every topic we're bringing up, people are going to listen to and go, oh, you can't say that. Like, we're not trying to be offensive, and I think it is worth considering these subtleties a little bit. This kind of goes two directions from here for me. I think that you're right. I think it's okay to look at this from the perspective of whether you want to say it's feminism or whatever cause you want to represent, whatever you think that she was representing, you want to represent that in the best light, and you should want to further the dialogue between yourself and the people you feel like this says more about the other side than you.
Exactly.
You want for this to extend the dialogue. You want to be the bigger person. You want to be the one who reaches out a hand. But she doesn't seem like that to me. She seemed like, and I keep saying I'm going to try to stop using her as an example. I think this is very common in
yes, it is.
On Twitter, woke Twitter, if you want to call it that. I don't think there's a lot of hand reaching, and you could make the argument like that they feel too beaten down and they feel like they've just been abused and harassed too much. But you can say this about any sort of issue. Like, one side feels like we've just taken too much for too long. But okay, but you're going to start lashing out at a lot of people who didn't do anything. Yeah. And that's what you're seeing here. And the other side of this that I wanted to mention is I don't think on either side you can let the most ridiculous voices be the narrative for anything. And you can look at that as just broad left versus right or science versus religion or whatever. Like you can, and this is what I hate about journalism. I hate game journalism especially because we find the most ridiculous quote we can. And I say we, I've been a part of this. I've tried not to do it, but we find the most absurd, ridiculous quote. All you prove is you found an asshole on Twitter. And you took the thing that they said and went like, look at what this group thinks about this firing. They did this with this story too. They found some douchebag on Reddit who puts this big tirade about like, we can get anybody fired we want, and they have to cringe and crumble at our feet, and they have to do everything we say, because I bet we could get somebody fired once a week if we had to, and all this just ridiculous stuff. And it was immediately shouted down on that page by his own group.
Yeah, it's good.
And yet, all the articles quote this guy, like all the people on Twitter who want to discuss this quote this guy, and he's the last person with a reasonable thought in his head about this. And that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
but we do this all the time. We need to go to the most reasonable people we can find on both sides and go, oh, maybe we're not as far apart as we thought. But instead we go like, well, if that's what they think, you guys can go screw yourselves. You know, we can do better than that. We really could.
We really can. And something else too, I just want to encourage the other communities and minority groups that are entering into gaming and stuff like that. When you were talking and you're going on about, you know, not being poisonous, I think a thing to help you to continue to want to not be poisonous is to remember exactly what's going on, and that is to strengthen a point that I was making prior to go along with what you were just saying. And that is, imagine if I went into the world of writing novels for tween girls about their newfound strength and independence, being a tough tomboy to liberate themselves from their oppressed point of view. They'd be like, what is a straight white guy doing writing books to little girls about being stronger?
Yeah.
What the hell's going on here? It'd make the community but then I'd be like, but I have every right to be here. I'm a human too, and I'm passionate about this.
Right.
Well, yeah, but you're a straight white guy. Like, well, I have daughters, you know, this time something like, yeah, but why are you, like, why is a guy making books for girls? Well, flip this around a little bit. When you're writing the narrative for the video games for tween boys, I'm not saying it's a perfect culture, but there's this certain mentality that they have, and you got to remember it when you come in here as a politically driven person where your politics are entwined in your identity, and you show up to a scene and then that's intertwined with your job, and you can't separate all of those things, and you're just that, and you got to remember that's very foreign, and then that's going to be poking out of the product that you're making and trying to push, and it's going to have these, it's just going to seem very foreign.
Yeah, and again, that says a lot of stuff about them and nothing about you.
No.
It's just simply a side effect of what we're trying to do, and ultimately, there is a version of a more diverse and more inclusive game industry that we would all like to see. And it doesn't always sound the same way from every person, but almost every gamer has some version of this complaint, like, I see too much of the same thing all the time. And the way we get that variation is from new voices. And nobody in their right mind, like when we see a good version of that, like how you see that screen at the beginning of each new Assassin's Creed that says, this game is made by a diverse team with different faiths and different ethnicities and different origins and all this stuff. And we all go like, we don't maybe think about that very much as we're waiting for the game to load up. But at the end of the game, we go like, man, that was really unique. That was really neat.
Yeah.
You know, so you can sort of see that we're thirsty for that in a way. Ultimately, the people who are busy saying, like, we absolutely don't want that, again, those are the people that you do not want to listen to in this dialogue, and you can't spend all your time addressing that voice and acting like everyone is speaking with it, because we're not.
Yeah, and to be very clear here, the point that I was trying to make, just so that anybody that listens to this doesn't try to skew it, I'm not against the stuff being a part of it. If you're drawn towards working in the game industry, you absolutely should. It's just that, remember, you are the alien in the room right now. It is just the fact. And so be gentle, and eventually you will find a nice place to be. If you are immediately harsh, you're still the alien in either scenario. It's just the truth to the situation. Just don't be brutal about pushback or feeling uncomfortable in situations unless it is overtly violent. So,
oh, sure, yeah. And even if it's, don't put up with harassment, don't whatever.
Yes.
I'm not saying that you should bend to everyone else's desires, or that you should try to water down your what you bring to the table. I don't think that at all. I think it just requires. Anything I say is going to sound like I'm asking you to bend over. I'm absolutely not. It's just that you have to come in with a certain understanding. However, when trust is violated, or when decorum is not used, you are still right within your rights to say, hey, this person's an asshole. Like, we get it, and we will be right there next to you. Just don't fire that trigger too fast. You know, it's like, if one person comes and goes, hey, first of all, how could you light somebody up after they go, first of all, I really appreciate you laying all this out. I really like this. Like, how often does an asshole start their dialogue that way? I've never seen it.
No, and I've
been criticized many, many times. So
that's a person really wanting to interact with it. And I had something, I was going to say something slightly funny, but I don't remember anymore, because I have been watching more Norm Macdonald than normal. And he's slowly seeping into my subtle joke making.
That episode where we talked about Norm Macdonald on the show,
yes,
and then I titled the episode The Norm Macdonald Effect. I don't know if I ever brought this up. Like, people got upset. First of all, that it did not involve Norm Macdonald, and then second, that I was a little bit critical, and it was probably unfair, because I've looked back at what he's up to now too, and I don't think it really applied anymore. My ultimately, in short, my point was that he spends too much time trying to appeal to a micro audience, like a couple of buddies he knows, that he'll just make an inside joke on a stage of 500-600 people, and he'll make a joke for his brother-in-law, or whatever. I don't think that's as much the case as it used to be, but like, that's the most thumbs down video on YouTube that we have.
Dude,
I changed the name. I'm like, I'm sorry, everyone. It's fine.
He is we ended up talking about Norm Macdonald, and I'm thrilled right now. He is he is YouTube comedy king. You go and you read the comment section on most of his videos that I've seen, because there's a guy called Not Norm on YouTube, and he just posts as many clips of Norm Macdonald as he can find, and they are all absolutely hilarious. Marie was even laughing, and she's standing there going, this is just crazy, because he is just absolutely crazy. Have you heard the one where he's talking about the South African runner? I think the guy was South African that had no legs.
No.
Oh my gosh, I got to send you that Conan O'Brien clip. That is just unbelievably hilarious.
I will certainly check that out. The last thing I really watched of his was his movie Dirty Work, which, as you know, I love.
Yes, it's been a long time since I've seen it. That's so true. Him and Artie? Was it Artie Lang?
Yeah, him and Artie Lang, and Chris Farley was in it. That's how long ago it was. And I will quote, typically, either Norm Macdonald's lines or Chris Farley's lines in that movie, and of course no one knows what the hell I'm talking about, but I love that movie. So that's a homework assignment for people. Go find a copy of Dirty Work. I don't know how you're going to find it now.
Oh, it exists
now that Blockbuster's gone.
Man, it's been so long since I've seen that. That is incredible. Yeah, just I'm glad we had this conversation. I've been seeing it creeping up here and there, and I want to reiterate those words. I want to encourage communities to get diverse, but just, when you're the outsider, when you're alien, remember where you're going. Most people aren't going to know half of anything about your gender studies stuff or care about it, sadly, because a lot of what you're dealing with is teenage boys. And, it's like Doritos, explosions.
But if you can manage to have a conversation with them, you have a microphone with which to explain your cause. She was doing a lot better before this started. Like, people, she has still, more than 12,000 followers on Twitter. It's like, you have an audience for this. If you use it wisely, you can do a lot more good than scoring a couple of damage points in a little sparring match. Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. That's a really good way of saying it. This wasn't a fight night.
I mean, is she hearing from a lot of undeserving assholes now? Absolutely. But it didn't have to go this way.
Yeah. No, I like what you're saying. Not a fight night.
Yeah. So, can I lighten the mood on our way out here?
Absolutely. Please do.
I pulled up too fast and made myself laugh. I'm going to switch to the full screen here. I wanted to ask the question, how should we handle actual toxic players? And the best example ever was, let me figure out which game this was. Battalion 1944, which is a game I've never heard of in my entire life. But it's something with online players. A guy got onto their, I don't know if it was a Slack channel or something, but they had something where he was able to directly communicate with the team, and he started harassing them and making death threats against male developers of this game. And you know what's going on now. So before he earned his gold skin for his weapon or whatever, they said, listen, we've determined your threats are not credible, so we're not going to turn you over to the authorities or anything, but we are going to draw a dick on your gold gun that you're about to earn. And I am going to pull this up on screen, so if you don't like seeing cartoon dicks. It's downward facing, so it's on the bottom of the gun, and so
what is this game is this for again?
Battalion 1944, I believe.
Okay.
They're like, no one's going to see it, but you're always going to know it's there.
That is hilarious.
I thought that was exceptional.
That is hilarious. What a fantastic story.
So there you have it. There are ways to deal with undeserving people. Obviously, if this guy had been an actual threat to anybody, or if they thought this was credible, absolutely go straight to the authorities, ban this guy for life from the game. They talked about that. They thought about banning him for life. You bring it on yourself. It's basically whoever abandons decorum first is the loser.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be.
Yeah, I agree.
So go forth, my developers and creators and writers, on your merry way. Be good to one another. Give people the benefit of the doubt. And if people go too far, yeah, absolutely, light them up. You'll not hear any complaints from me. If you guys enjoy the show, please check us out. Subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places we talk about all the time. You can find our videos. A video version of the show is always on YouTube. And CodeWritePlay.com is where we link to everything, put up show notes. We'd love to hear from you, even this week.
Yes.
Even this week, we will be glad to have a conversation, and, I ain't scared. So, thank you, John. It was wonderful having you back.
It was fun, man.
And we will catch the rest of you next time. Thanks, everybody.